Hello, welcome to another episode of Therapy, etc. I have a guest here with me today that's going to be sharing some of her experiences working in sports and more. So I will have her get right in here. Well, hello, hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here in your platform and have this engaging conversation with you.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you're here. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling excited. I'm excited to kind of deep dive into this and have a conversation with you.
I
We definitely
know.
know each other from a personal level, and it's
Uh-huh.
always a pleasure to interact with you, to dialogue with you, to have good times with you.
Yes,
My
we have.
heart. So I'm honored. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's start by introducing you because I didn't really share who you are and what you do. So why don't we start there?
Okay. So my name's Janet Sevilla. I'm a sister. I'm a tia. I am a daughter. I'm a
Mhm.
friend. I'm a granddaughter. And then my day to day, I am a community philanthropist, corporate social responsibility professional, sports
Mhm.
philanthropy. So, in essence,
Mhm.
I'm a Latina woman that works in professional sports. I've been in the
Wow.
industry for over 13 years. Very hard to believe that it's been that long. Never did I imagine I would come this far. I started as a little girl kind of really not interested in sports per se.
Mhm.
I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia. My career brought me here, but most of my childhood has been in Los Angeles. I'm from Ecuadorian and Nicaraguan parents, so both
Mhm.
Central
Mhm.
and South America. My family still lives in Los Angeles there. Went to college at UC Santa Barbara, so go Gauchos, which is
There you go.
where we know each other. Um, Graduated there with a degree in Black Studies and Spanish and sports management. And so
Mhm.
went to high school in Los Angeles High School for anyone that's from the area. And pretty much have dedicated a good amount of my time in philanthropy work and both in sports and then also dabbed into some diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, from a professional perspective,
Wow.
that. From a personal perspective, I'm a runner. I enjoy running a
Uh-huh.
lot. I'm a tia to a large group of nieces and nephews. I have about 14 nieces and nephews, a lot.
Oh my goodness, we have that in common. I have 15.
Me ganaste por uno.
Woo.
Bilingual. I come from a very big family. Some of them reside here in Georgia, LA, and also New York, and of course, my parents' mother country as well. I enjoy reading. Let's see what else. I enjoy hanging out with friends, kind of getting to know each other. I do enjoy being outdoors, so
Mhm.
definitely it's something that kind of rejuvenates me per se. But yeah, that's
Mhm.
you'll always find me probably listening to some type of podcast. Like I mentioned, I enjoy reading. I'm a big history snub. I like museums
Mhm.
as well. So yeah, it's
You're
just a
doing it,
little
girl. I love
taste
it.
of me.
I love it. So you said that from a young age you weren't really interested in sports, but now you find yourself in that industry. How did that even happen?
So honestly, I have to give credit to my older brother George. When I was
Okay.
a kid, he was living with me and my grandmother, and I grew up in Pico Union, and it wasn't the safest neighborhood per se. And so
Mhm.
he convinced my grandmother to allow me to enroll into a youth center called LA Res Shield, and that's really where I got my first introduction to sports. He enrolled me in water polo, which I have didn't have any experience whatsoever, but it was really my
Uh-huh.
outlet to be able to first leave the home,
Uh-huh.
and second be able to kind of make some friends and really kind of be in a group setting. For context, at 5 years old, I went to go live with my grandmother, and so I was
Mhm.
raised by her, and so the youth center was only a couple of blocks away. And so that was really my first interaction with sports, is just being on a team perspective and kind of getting to know people. I wasn't the most athletic kid, but there was a moment at that youth center that completely changed my life, that later on set the path to the career that I am in today. And I'll never forget this. It was a sports banquet that we had, and we had an LA Lakers player by the name of AC Green, which I'm sure everybody knows, came to the youth center. And it was our awards banquet, and he was calling the kid's name up, and he called my name up, and I came up, and he gave me this trophy. And I'm just like in awe, like, what is this? And that will always stay in my mind, because as we'll continue talking, it ended up being some of the work that I did. And so that to me changed my life, but I didn't realize to the extent that it would.
Did you even know who he was at that time?
I did not know who he was because, like I said, I wasn't really interested in it. And I was I was forced into it because, like I mentioned, my brother would take me to the youth center. And when I would come home from school, I had to fight with my older brother to watch TV. And I always lost the battle. So most of my time I would sit down and we would sit there and watch Chicago Bulls games during the Jordan era. And we would watch New York games, and we would watch Laker games. And I didn't really have much of a choice, and I didn't understand the game. But it was the activity that me and my brother did. And so I've always shared that with him, that I wouldn't be in this path if it wasn't for him. And then fast forward, I say I didn't become actively an athlete until I was in high school. In high school, I was a 3-sport athlete. I played basketball, volleyball, I did swimming. I developed a lot of great relationships from then, a lot of my good friends that I still keep in touch with today that were my teammates. And that helped me develop a lot of skill sets and being disciplined and kind of being able to take a leadership position and being able to kind of step out of my comfort zone. And I say this I'm the type of athlete that I learned how to play. I'm
like, you weren't born into it, right?
Yeah, I wasn't born into it. My family did not. I think my dad used to swim when he was a kid. I think my mom did too. I know one of my brothers played football and lacrosse, but for the most part, I didn't. I saw it as I was a student athlete, and so I kept my grades up. I was always eligible to play in sports. And then I would say in college, I tried out for the women's basketball team, didn't quite make it. I did have a dream of being in the WNBA, but, from a skill set perspective, I wasn't quite developed, and I was pretty short too. And so in college, that's kind of where the transformation of sports as an athlete to learning the business perspective started. I worked at recreational sports at UC Santa Barbara, started off in the office.
I remember you working there.
Did you? Girl, I lived at that gym like no other.
Yes, you did. I mean, I would only go de vez en cuando, but you were there.
I was there. And so I always had that kind of interest in it. Didn't know there was a business aspect at all, didn't see women in the business aspect. And so I always had a foot in philanthropy. I do want to say that as a kid, like I mentioned, I was one of the kids that went to the youth centers. I was involved in the YMCA club. I was in Boys and Girls Club. And so a lot of these groups that later on in my professional career, I'm able to contribute back to it. And so I always had kind of those two niches, never knew what it was. And then I would say back in college, I don't know, I think you might have been there, but there was this like soccer fundraiser that we did with Chivas, and it was in response to a hurricane relief. And I was able to gather.
I might have.
Yeah, I was at Harder Stadium, the soccer stadium.
Yeah.
And it was a fundraiser, and it was the first time this like major sports team, international by the way, came into the city. And we were able to, I was part of the planning committee and was able to kind of galvanize my friends from different organizations and ask them to come and volunteer. My director at that time and the department head were completely impressed. And I was like, oh my God, this feels pretty cool, really, really nice. And then it was one of those where I didn't really quite understand what the role is. Like I knew there was athletes involved. Again, most of my exposure was to kind of on the male side of sports. Um,
Yeah.
I did a lot of recreational sports as well. Did some intramurals, did some basketball, did some volleyball of some sort. So that highly influenced what it is that I do now and how it evolved, sort of being on the pitch or on the court to the professional business side of it.
Wow. What a journey so far, because like it's definitely, or what I'm hearing is that your brother forced you to do this, and then
I'm
you kind
grateful
of
for
like,
it.
yeah, yeah, but like you definitely like flourished into it, because after graduation, then you went off, and I know that you were playing with was it Galaxy that you were, or not playing?
So there's a
You were
very cool
working.
story to that one too.
Yeah, I want to know all about it.
Ooh, okay, so we hung out on the RBR a lot, and I changed my major several times when I was in Santa Barbara. I ended up with a major in Black Studies and Spanish and sports management, and so why Black Studies? During my undergrad or the last couple of years, I had taken a class with Professor Otis Madison, who, if you've ever taken a class with him, he is definitely a leader, a thought leader in diversity, equity, inclusion. And this particular class was focused on Black athletes and activism in sports. And so I learned about the role
Oh.
that Black athletes had in being able to make change within our society and culture, and some of the inequities they experienced. I became a lot more interested in sort of the role that women took as well to be able to gain an equal platform in participation as far as an athlete. And so that definitely sort of opened sort of like a little fire within me. I became intrigued about it. Like I mentioned, I enjoy history and learning about it. And I
Mhm.
had reading a thesis paper on um, higher education and minority athletes, particularly Black athletes, and kind of the how looking at how a lot of them would probably leave college prior to, and do they develop a backup plan for that? Because if they don't have the longevity within the sports industry, then what do they fall back on? And so that
Mhm.
opened me up a lot to figure out, how can I make an impact in sports on the business side and use community, for example.
Right.
And
Right.
right before I graduated Santa Barbara, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was completely burned out. And I wasn't sure if I kind of had the capacity to go into grad school, but I also
Mhm.
wanted to do something in sports. I did not know what it is. And so
Mhm.
after college, I went and decided that I was going to take a trip. I went to Spain. I went to Spain for about 3 months and stayed
I don't
out
know
there.
if I knew about that. I was a year younger, so I was probably still stressing over senior year.
Yeah, you were. Like it was, yes, because yes, it was December. Ooh, I can't even remember. But I went to Spain. Stayed over there with some friends, and I'll never forget this. I was sitting across the street of Camp Nou, which is FC Barcelona's stadium. So if you've ever traveled there, and there's a really beautiful park, which I'm still hoping is there. And I remember I couldn't get internet access at my friend's house, so I went over to the park, started kind of looking in there, and the big announcement, sports international announcement, was made that David Beckham was coming to Los Angeles, particularly LA Galaxy, to come and
Yes.
play. And I was like,
Yep.
oh my God, that's so cool. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool if I could, if I could maybe like work for them. Mind you, I say this, that I was never a
Mhm.
soccer fan at that time. It's changed now.
Mhm.
Um, and, my money was running dry and I needed to come home. So I came home. But in that, I made the decision that I was not going to go to grad school, that I was going to work in some capacity to work in sports. I didn't know what that was. I told myself I was
Mhm.
going to give myself about a year, and then you see how that was going to work out for me. And so came back, and a good friend of mine from Santa Barbara, her and I had done Lakers camp together. So I will say that while I was at Santa Barbara, I had the opportunity to work Lakers camp, first as an intern, then came back a couple of summers as a administrative staff member and built really great
Yeah.
relationships, and came
Wow.
back. And I remember that when I came back, I had a friend who kind of sent me the job description of an internship at the Galaxy. And I was like, well, it's, I read it, it was community. I didn't know exactly what that was yet, but I saw in the job description, it said, working with nonprofit organizations and giving out donated tickets and
Mm-hmm.
sending out auction items. And I say that with, I had that experience previously before. So I was like, okay, I think I could do this. So
Mm-hmm.
I
Hmm.
applied for it, and lo and behold, I got it.
Wow. I
And
remember those days when you used to work there and the very long hours. I remember doing like, remember we used to go get yogurt at like
yes,
8 p.m. on like a random like
yes,
Wednesday or something.
yeah. And so that was my very first, well, that was sort of my very first like introduction into it. But the
Mhm.
catch to that was it was an internship. So I say that with, it was free labor, and I had to be a student. And so at that time, I was already graduating out of high school, and that was kind of really the only barrier for me to get that position. And so I went and I enrolled at West LA College, and
Oh, you were
uh,
graduating from college. You had already graduated from
I
college
had
at this
already,
point.
right, I had already graduated from college, and they were one
Okay.
of the requirements is that you needed to receive student credit, academic credit. And so I was like, well,
Mhm.
I'm not in school, and I'm not going to go back to Santa Barbara. And so I'm like, well, let me go enroll into the community college. And I went to go talk to their career advisor, enrolled in like 2 online classes and 1 like career development class. Had a conversation with her and told her like what my vision was, that I wanted to get this internship. I qualified. I went through the interview process, but the barrier was that I needed to get school credit. So like, what can we be? What can we do?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
will forever be grateful for her because she allowed me to enroll in her class. And we would meet every week. I would have to write a report about what were my job responsibilities. And so I say that
Wow.
with, I I figured it out in that sense, and that was where I really started falling in love with sports philanthropy. I was in a position to be able to raise money and then turn it around and invest it back in the community. I was able to, do soccer clinics, Easter egg hunts, all of these sorts of things, and it also gave me an opportunity to kind of start building my network and start looking at some of the nonprofits that I was a part of and be able to kind of
Mhm.
get them involved as well. And so
Wow.
that was the very first start per se.
Wow. So, you're sharing all of these things, and earlier you mentioned that there's not a lot of women in this industry. How has that piece been for you? Because, like you said, like you traveled, you're now in Atlanta because work took you there. Um, but what are some of the challenges that you are a woman, not only a woman, but a woman of color, and you are in these spaces where my assumption is it's all men, but you tell me.
So it is a male dominated industry. One of the first challenges I would say is being first generation Latina. There are not, there were nice, and I'm happy that I'm saying were because it's changing. When I first started, there were not that many Latinas in sports. I didn't know them. I didn't come across them. There were definitely women that I came across that from different ethnic backgrounds, but the majority, there was no Latina women. And so being first generation, one of my challenges was like, how do you, one, learning how to navigate what corporate is. I'm the, I come from a family of 5 siblings, and I'm the only one that went to college and graduated. And
Mm,
I'm in a corporate job per se, is what kind of people would view it. But my parents are blue collar individuals, and
mhm.
so challenges that I would have, they wouldn't understand, or when I would try to speak to them about it, they they would tell me to kind of stay calm, to just go to work and kind of put your head down and do things.
Yeah, that's a common message. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, also, I would say that early on, there were some men that were mentors and advocates for me that were able to guide me in the path. What I Early on in my career, I was so focused in learning how to do the job, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
second, I had a fear that if I wasn't doing my job well, that someone else can just kind of step into my job and kind of push me away, because
Oh,
it's like,
wow.
everyone's knocking at the door and everyone wants to work for these sports teams. And so
Right.
once
Super competitive.
it is super competitive. It is extremely super competitive, but I feel like how the industry has evolved, there's so much more opportunities out there now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was always looking for that woman that can help guide me. And the women that I initially came across, were helpful in kind of getting the job done, but weren't investing in the time to really have me grow. And that was the lesson that I had to learn. And I continue to learn, and I'm even learning now that, not every single person that you come across is interested in your professional growth, and that you have to be the one
Mm-hmm.
that's to actively take steps to make yourself grow.
I'm curious about that because you're sharing that there's women in the same industry that were working with you, but it sounds like they were not very like they were there to help you do the or to manage you in the job functions, but not in like the supportive role or like the having bigger conversations surrounding, hey, let's stick together, we're women in the sports industry. Is that kind of what it sounds like?
Yes.
How I mean, I'm a little like surprised because I would think that it's like, let's stick together, we got this. But what do you think were the barriers there?
So I say that with, it's not I don't want to generalize it.
Okay.
There was a small segment of women that I didn't come in contact with. And then there was a even bigger segment of women that have been extremely supportive. And part of me was also looking at the support, in the in the wrong way, like expecting someone to invest in my growth without realizing, one, were they interested, in two, did they have the capacity for it, and three, were they really interested in developing someone. And
Mhm,
so, early on in my career, I was introduced to an organization called WISE, which is Women in Sports and in Events, that I'm still involved in now. And
mhm,
they were the very first group of women that I saw kind of outside of my day to day, that were providing the mentorship, providing the career panels, providing the conversations that I was, craving for, from a personal and a
mhm,
professional perspective. And so really kind of leaned into that group of women, got involved with them, was
mhm.
able to make really good contacts. And in fact, when I moved from LA to Atlanta, I got connected from the chapter in LA to the chapter in Atlanta. And
Oh,
so,
so
so
you
the
already had like a home base, so to speak.
yes. And so I
Okay.
also say this with, to kind of answer your question about there's a few, I have had experiences of a few women that were not supportive. And
Mhm,
it was, I don't, I, part of me really didn't understand why they weren't. Um,
mhm.
I would have to say that probably competition is probably one thing as well, kind of having that mindset of, having to compete for different roles, which in my
Yeah.
perspective, like there's enough room to be able to collaborate.
Yeah, I'm big
Um,
on that. I always say that like there's enough clients work for everybody.
yes.
There is.
I will have to say this, that being in the years that I am now, I'm excited of how the industry has evolved for women. There has
Mhm,
been tremendous growth. There has been tremendous leaders, that have been extremely vocal. And this notion that there is no value in women's sports is just not true. There is tremendous value in it. And a lot of it is collaborating. finding the right collaborators to be able to amplify voices. And so now I see Latina leaders, I see Latina mentors. I myself um, am leaning into that role as well, because
Mm,
I don't want the next generation of not only Latina women, but just any women of color to kind of go through the rough patches that I experienced. I'm grateful for the
mhm,
rough patches because they definitely made me who I am today. Um,
mhm.
but I say that with it's been sort of a long time coming. I could only imagine a Latina woman working in sports in the 80s or
Girl,
the
I don't even know if
90s.
that was actually happening. I mean, it feels like up until, I don't know, I just saw this a few weeks ago that there's like a new, is it like a sports anchor, that's a woman sports anchor, a Latina woman, a Latina sports anchor, or something like this that I saw recently. Maybe she's not a sports anchor. I'd have to go back and fact check, but it was like a big deal because it was a woman in sports that was like in a higher role than what is normally seen.
Yes, so you
So
have,
these are just paths that are barely getting created right now.
and that for me, I'm excited for it. Don't get me wrong. I'm super excited to see women and women of color become VPs in organizations. I'm excited to see women step into being anchors, to being coaches, both on the men's and the women's side of sports, to be able to see Latinas take on media companies and become owners of sports teams, or to become owners of leagues. Like, I
Hmm.
I'm excited for the next generation that is coming, but but there's so much more work to do. And
Yeah.
there is so much breaking down of stereotypes and misconceptions within it. And to me, I would think that by this time, like, we should be far ahead, far ahead.
Yes. And yet it's like we're just like scraping. I'm thinking about a path, and we're just, brushing the leaves from side to side right now, cleaning the sidewalk slowly.
Yeah, I
Because it sounds and it feels like a hard and long path still.
it is a hard and long path. I also firmly believe that the reason, probably the story of how it's evolved, has to do because there was never people in those spaces to kind of break their barriers. And so I always found myself telling my inner self, like, you're you're the only Latina in the room. And I'm like, it felt so uncomfortable. There were days where I felt invisible. There were days where I felt small. There were
Hmm.
days where
Hmm.
it was hard for me to speak up. And realizing that I was, a sense, propping the door open, and for it to be fully open, I had to lean into that power and
Hmm.
not be scared of it, not be, and go into it knowing that if I do make a mistake, well, then I'm going to learn from it. And
Hmm.
so being sort of the first in the path is an honor. And I can only imagine women who are at sort of that in front of world audiences. I could only imagine some of the fears that they experienced as well. And when I hear their stories, I'm like, oh my God, so and so experienced this, and I did too. And so there's that commonality there.
Hmm. Hmm. But when you find yourself in these spaces, and even if it happens now, like, how do you find the strength to still go back in there? Because I'm imagining like being in a room and everybody is like a white man, for example, and then here we are, because being in these spaces, like I've been in the corporate world, and I'm the only person of color, or I'm the only Latina in the room. I remember just kind of like nodding yes or nodding no, or not really saying what I was thinking or calling things out, because it was seen as, or I felt that maybe my voice wasn't important enough. So how do you find the strength to still stay in these spaces and speak up now if you're feeling more comfortable to do so?
Um, Early on, so there's a part of me that is extremely extroverted, and then there's also a part of me that's introverted as well. And
Mhm.
when I was brought to the table early on, um, I would sit and observe the dynamic. Who were the people that were driving the bus? Who were the people that were agreeing, that were disagreeing? And I was always very curious on the people that would always disagree or challenge the group. And I like that, and I lean towards that. And so I would pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that most of my early career, I just did what I was told.
Yeah.
And little did I
Yeah.
realize that I needed to develop my own voice. I would say that as I continued to grow, there was always a sense of discomfort in calling out things that either weren't probably wouldn't be seen in a good light from
Mm-hmm.
the outside perspective. And also realizing opportunities that maybe I had tried with the previous organization that I think would be awesome for them to try.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guilty of being silent sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but also the times that I have taken the steps and calling things out, they resulted in change. And for me,
That's
that's
awesome.
what made those moments a lot worth it. I'll
Yeah.
share
Yeah.
a moment that recently happened to me. Um, I was on a client call, and we were talking about an event that was coming up, and they were looking at different stops to do. And so there was a conversation about kind of doing a photo op with the community of color, and it rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, but you're gonna do X, Y, and Z, and you're gonna insert this group here, but I see the big thing. But after what we have been through and currently going through, like, that doesn't seem extremely genuine to me.
Yeah. It
um
seems like just like a prop photo.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I called it out. I called it out, and I was completely transparent that when I heard you speak that you were going to do X, Y, and Z, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And
Mm-hmm.
from a brand perspective, I don't think that would be a good thing for you to take on right now. And I was very proud that I did that. At the time that I had concluded that meeting, I was very frustrated that people were still kind of thinking that way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and when in it also, I'm not gonna lie, I was scared.
You're like, what's gonna happen after I get off this call?
I say this because there have been key moments in my career where I have called things out, and I have either been ignored, or I have been you know reprimanded is not the right word, but something's been brought to my attention that kind of the
Yeah.
way
You
it
were.
was presented was not in line with what the general consensus is. And I'm like, you just need a different perspective, and you're trying to reach a different audience. And so um, I I am leaning towards that being one of my talents, to kind of being able to see sort of like the cracks
Mm-hmm.
from the perspective of opportunities. Like, there is so much growth if you were maybe to tweak your messaging in this perspective, if you were to maybe collaborate with this organization in this perspective. I did a lot of that in my role as manager, and being able to kind of create a brand. One of the projects that I'm very proud of that I was able to contribute is kind of launching the Spanish brand for the Atlanta Braves, Los Bravos, and being able how to figure out how to talk to the Latino community, understanding the different Latino communities there are in Atlanta, and how do you talk to
Mm-hmm.
them, and also understanding how do you do messaging between first generation individuals that have immigrated here, third generations, and kind of get them excited to it. And so, and also understanding sort of the overall society inequities that prevent them
Mm-hmm.
from engaging in sports as I would normally, or opportunities that, because of resources are not there, they, what I would take for a leisure activity, like, I think back that, like, maybe my parents at one time probably would have not been able to enjoy some of the activities that I did from a professional standpoint. So I say that with it comes with experience. I have this acronym that was given to me by one of my bosses about fear, and it was he would always
I'm gonna write this one down.
Are you? I've got to give credit to my old boss, Holly from UCSB Recreational Sports. And so he had an acronym called False Expectations About Reality. And so there were instances where when I do feel this sort of fear. And I also listen to my body too. That was one thing that I've gotten better at, is tuning into the signs my body gives me. So if I start feeling like a little bit uneasy, or like I'm getting better at listening to the unrest in my soul, and just leaning into it, and the word, and I always ask myself at the end when I'm in doubt, like, what's the worst that can happen? And what the worst that can happen, I write it down. And then I write it down, so it kind of just like leaves my mind. And then I
Loses its power.
yeah. And so I say that with, it's almost been like this superpower that I've been getting comfortable leaning into the last, I would say maybe like 5 years or so, if you wanted to put a time frame on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think about other women that, I think about, women from the U.S. Women's soccer team that have called out the inequity in pay, and they have
Yep.
fought for equal pay for the work that they're doing at the highest level in their career. I think about the women who may have had a very uncomfortable, unfortunate circumstance within their professional career, and were brave enough to step up to the plate and kind of call it out. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it's these different fears, because unfortunately, and I think this is evolving, I would have to say this, unfortunately, early on in my career, you're taught this message that like everyone's trying to get into the industry, everyone's trying to break into the industry, and that you don't want to like shine away from your reputation, or kind of be sort of like spotlighted in a negative way, or that you can't get in, because the community is small. I'm not gonna lie, the community is
Mm-hmm.
super
Everybody
small.
knows each other, I'm assuming, one way or another.
Everybody knows each other in one way or another. And so I say that with, you know, having the power to call things out is a super strength that I wish I knew early in my career. And I wish
Mm-hmm.
someone had, I want to say, coached me through it. But what I have learned is that I had to learn it for myself. And I had to learn my own voice. And
Mm-hmm.
to wait for someone or some book or some Instagram post or something to tell me the rules, it just wasn't going to apply for me. And you have to
Mm-hmm.
be okay with trying something out and it doesn't work out, and try
Try
something new.
something different, yeah. So now that you are in Atlanta, you're working with the Braves, right?
Actually, no, I'm
Oh,
not.
you're not working with the Braves anymore. Oh, well, you were working with the
I
Braves.
was working with them. I did. So I actually moved on from the Braves in 2020. I took some time off and reset. And right at the beginning of the pandemic, I got the opportunity to work with the Georgia World Congress Center, which is equivalent to, I would say, kind of like LA Convention Center for folks in LA. And so they are the number one sports and entertainment venue in the world, hospitality. So they host trade shows, they host conferences, they host sporting events, any major sporting event to the city they're involved in. So they were very critical for Super Bowl, for in 2020, I was going to have the opportunity to work on the Final Four, which was super exciting for me. And of course, kind of pandemic came and that didn't
I
happen.
know.
But yeah, I've been with the organization a little. Well, it's actually, believe it or
About a
not,
year?
about a year. Yes.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it's it's a it's a left turn is what I call it, because it's not a sports team, but they are an integral business of the state of Georgia. Like, they bring in so much business into the
Mm-hmm.
state, and they pour into the community a lot as well. And so my role there is I'm the manager of sustainability and corporate social responsibility. And so I was brought into the organization to help elevate their philanthropy platform, and also help support them continuing in their sustainability initiatives, which for me, it's a new subject matter. And so I've been learning so much about it, and
Mm-hmm.
learning how philanthropy, environmental impact interconnect with one another. There's an
You're
opportunity.
doing it, Mujer. I love it.
There's an
I
opportunity
love it.
to still work with different nonprofit organizations. It's in hospitality and tourism. I have a huge interest in international sporting events. And I felt with this opportunity, I would have a chance to dab into a different part of the industry. So there's still a touch point with sports there. I had the opportunity to work the NBA All-Star game this year with State Farm Arena through
Oh
my
my
connection
goodness.
with sustainability. And so I was able to help support them. They have an awesome team over at State Farm Arena that handles their sustainability initiative. And so um, a woman there actually, she was she led the efforts there, and I'm so extremely proud of her and to be learning from her. She created the very first NBA All-Star game that was zero waste free. And that is
Wow.
an awesome accomplishment. I learned so much from her and became very inspired to kind of to be able to kind of learn more about the space and be able to figure out how me in the work that I'm doing can make that impact.
Yeah.
So I'm in two spaces, and I'm liking it. It's definitely a lot of learning. So
It kind of feels like this was like the culmination of all of the things that you've been doing, like working in sports, but then also the philanthropy piece and meshing the two together. Because of working in this space. And like you said, like you still have interaction with sports and so much more, and a variety of them too. So it really gives you the opportunity to learn more than just I know you've done soccer and you've done baseball, right? And
yes,
and basketball in college too. So it gives you the opportunity to have experience kind of like across the board.
yes.
Good for you. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
Because like we don't see this. Like I feel we don't see mujeres like you in these spaces. And so hearing you and just kind of like hearing about your journey, I'm like, as you're sharing, I'm like visualizing it, how it was for you in these spaces.
and
Um,
and in these spaces, I've had my days, girl. There were days where I didn't know um, if there were days where I didn't know if I wanted to kind of continue in the space. I didn't share this earlier, but right before I had, right before, I worked with the Galaxy as an intern. One thing I did is I went to work for the Lakers for about a year. And that's where I really, that second opportunity to work with the Lakers in community relations really like set in stone that I wanted to do sports philanthropy and corporate social responsibility. And
mhm.
while I was working for them, I had already decided that I was going to go back to grad school, and I was in the middle of grad school applying and going to them. And then I got a call from I got the call from the director of my former department and asked me to come and kind of help in the office for a couple of days. And so I said, sure, that I don't mind at all. And I'll never forget, I'm sitting in the office, and I said to myself, you know what? I think I can do this job. Like, I'm doing it now. Why not apply for it? And there was a part of me internally that was saying, no, but you're going to go to grad school. Like, that was
That's
the
the next step.
step. And I said, and I was scared that I wasn't going to get it. And I went ahead and I applied for it. And I went through the interview process and I got it. And I had to make a decision about, are you going to take this full-time job or are you going to go to grad school? And then I also had to make a decision. I'm like, well, are you going to leave the Lakers? And everybody's like, you're going to leave the Lakers? And I'm like, like year, and I wanted some benefits. Like I
Yeah.
wanted some
Yeah.
insurance. And so I made
Uh-huh.
the decision to put grad school on pause. Had phenomenal bosses at the Lakers and they were able to work with me. And then I started my journey with the Galaxy and I was there for 7 amazing seasons. I got to win a championship with them and learned so much there. I will have to say this with my Lakers opportunity, I had actually applied for that role like 2 years before or a year and a half. And I didn't get it.
And now you're like, snap, snap.
I did not get it. I remember I remember I must have been like the year after my senior year in Santa Barbara, and I applied for it and I didn't get it. And I cried so much. I'm like, no, I didn't get it. And a year and a half or maybe 2 years later, I applied for it. It happened to be the same role, but it was different. It was actually like, it wasn't an internship at that time anymore. And I
Mm-hmm.
applied for it. The difference was, there were two differences I have to attribute it. One is I build my network. And so the people that I had met through camp were critical in helping to be the inside voices and speak my name in the room. And two, I
Mm-hmm.
had gained the experience through through my internship with the Galaxy. And so I was very blessed that it happened the way that it did. And it definitely that experience led to the Galaxy full time, and the Galaxy full time led me to the Braves, and I was with the Braves for 7 seasons, and that experience there led me to where I am now. So I say this
Wow.
with almost kind of like a domino effect, and not knowing, you just don't know where your career path or who you meet is going to speak your name in the room, like I mentioned, and kind of be your advocate.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So we're going to start wrapping up, but before we do, are you going to make it back to LA? The Olympics are happening. I mean, I need to know, am I going to have an inside scoop here? Trying to, put my name in the in the in the pile of names that people probably ask you.
So, you are not the only person that has asked me that. I am an LA girl. I have LA in my heart. I do have the desire to come back. Um, but I still feel like I have some impact left to do here in Atlanta. The community here has definitely embraced me. I've built an amazing network both professionally and personally. And there's still a lot of community impactful work to do. And so I don't have a timeline of when. I'm gonna leave it up to the beings above to figure it out for me, because they have
Yeah.
brought me this far. So I'm sure
Uh-huh.
that they know what they have. But don't get me started. I am fully aware about LA Olympics 2028, and I definitely want to. I want to work the Olympics. I do. I want to throw it out there.
Girl, take me with you. Yo me pongo ahí, whatever you need me to do, just so I'm in the mix, snap some photos.
And there's so many, before the Olympics, the World Cup is coming here, and I want to have some role in that. And so, like I said, having kind of this stepping into international big sporting events that come into the cities, understanding how that dynamic works, that's a whole nother sort of avenue in the space as well. And the women that are running that space too has changed, and it's exciting. It's super exciting to see how many women are running sort of the Olympic space, the sort of NCAA, the World Cup space. So
Yep.
we'll just.
And then we have the new team here in LA,
Yes,
in
the
the
new women's
city.
soccer team.
Yes, I'm like all the women up there. I love it. There's Eva Longoria and America Ferreira, and who else is in there? Natalie Portman's in there. So there's a few other
I
people.
believe Serena Williams, her daughter.
Serena Williams, that's right.
I think Candace Parker is too, if I'm not mistaken.
But there's a few women that,
so I
like,
say
it's
that with how
amazing.
encouraging is that? Oh my goodness, you have
Yeah.
all of these women who are taking ownership in who are taking roles as owners. I have to brag about our Atlanta Dream here. We have Renee Montgomery, who is a former WNBA athlete that, she took a year to developed her athlete activism, and she became very vocal when she became very vocal and supportive with the Georgia elections, and being able to get the vote out was critical here in the state of Georgia. As everybody knows, we flipped blue here, and she just recently became an owner of the Atlanta Dream, the team that she used to play on. Let me
Oh
tell
my
you.
God, that is freaking awesome.
And the former owner, if people didn't follow, the former owner of the team was one of the candidates that was running, and was her rhetoric was not, it just wasn't right. And so for her to be a former player to then take on the role of being an owner, that is powerful. That is some boss moves. I mean, incredible. And
Mhm.
I'm so excited to see what she's going to do with that team.
That is so awesome. I love hearing these stories. I didn't know about that, but I love it. I'm so excited for your journey, all the things that you've done, all the hard work. I remember the late nights, mujeres, paying off. I hope. It sounds
Thank
like it is.
you. Thank you. I mean, there were a couple of conferences I traveled to New York, and
Yeah.
you let me crash on your couch because, well, let's just say you have been supportive through this growth as well, and I cannot thank you enough.
Oh, of course, of course. Always a pleasure. And when you come to LA, let me know. I
Oh,
have another couch you could crash on.
I will take you up on that offer.
For real. Bueno, any last minute words to the people that are watching us or hearing us?
Um, I definitely want to encourage anyone that wants to take on this path of careers in sports to kind of go with it open mind. Um,
Mhm.
Definitely the network is growing. I am happy to open my emails and my LinkedIn's to share this experience with anyone that's interested in it. We have briefly touched on this, or you had mentioned one of the things you had asked to me, like ways of keeping self-care. I don't
Yep.
think self-care is a topic that is, it's actually, I take this, it wasn't addressed early in my career. And I say this with, I did experience some burnout, really, really bad burnout from the perspective of, I dedicated so much time to it. Um, Part of it was not having a balance. We always talk about work-life balance, and I've come to learn that in this field, it's really work-life integration and having an understanding of what
Mhm.
the expectations are of what your workload is, setting boundaries, learning how to say
Yep.
no, learning how to say
That's
no
a big
to,
one. Yeah. And not feeling guilty about it, being okay with your truth that this is what you need in this moment. And if that no is part of it, that's okay.
yes, I would have to say that the last year and a half, even though we've been through a pandemic, I definitely focused a lot on self-care and caring for myself, both from a mental perspective, a health perspective, and eating. Like I mentioned, I'm a runner. I like exercise. For me, fills my cup. I can
Mhm.
tell that if I go 3 days max without some type of exercise, like my I become heavy. I feel heavier. I don't feel
And then
relaxed.
yeah, stuff starts building up. At least that's what happens with me. I'm
A
like, I
hundred
need
percent.
to do something.
I need to do something. 4 years ago, I started journaling. I have this little book. It's a 5-year plan. It has a
Hmm.
prompt per night.
Uh-huh.
I fill it out, and I started that as a result of um, going on 5 years now. I experienced probably the most devastating loss of my life. My grandmother transitioned, and that completely like shook me to my ground. And
Hmm.
I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know
Hmm.
how to cope with the emotions. I didn't know any of that. And so I was gifted. There was that book, and I was gifted another book as well that got me kind of writing.
Hmm.
And I also have to say, seeking professional help, I reached out to a grief counselor and started doing some grief counseling to kind of help me through the different emotions of it. I look at
Wow.
your profession and as a profession that it it's not anything different than going to the dentist or going to go get your annual women exam or you're going to go get
Right.
your annual doctor exam. And
Exactly.
we don't have those conversations, at least in our community, Latino community, we don't. It's getting better. I would have to say that it's getting better. So those are
It
just,
also depends on who you ask though, because I feel like in certain spaces it's still like, "Mm, mm, mm." So it's very slow and subtle.
yes, very slow and subtle. So, and also kind of investing your time with the people that matter. That to me is self-care.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
I did this when I first started working in baseball, and I will forever thank one of my friends. I invested in a massage membership. And can I
Oh my
tell you,
goodness.
it is the most, like, that's how I show self-care and self-love for myself. But on the days where I'm just like, okay, I need some wellness, I go to it. And I've been a member for about 8 years now, and I am such a huge advocate for it.
Oh my
It's
goodness. I love
definitely
that.
life changing, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning some things. So, last minute words.
And I do want to just say that I love hearing that you journal, because I think there's a lot of healing through words and written words specifically. So I am so happy to hear that you journal. I'm a big journaler. I've always had like a diary ever since I was a kid. And that's just kind of like, transition into now journaling.
So,
So I'm a big advocate for that.
so the power with that. One of my greatest fears early on when I lost my grandmother was forgetting about her, and forgetting about what her voice looked like,
Mhm.
her images and all that. And one thing that I leaned into, one thing that I
We're
leaned
all good here.
into journaling is, anytime I have a dream with her, I write it down. I write
Mm.
it down, and there's just like this sense of, one, keeping the memories, two, um, understanding the emotion with it, and I've seen the evolvement of how the dreams have been. And so I say this when you were mentioning kind of the power of the word and of the written word, and kind of what it when you look back at it and you reflect and remembering your state of how you were at that time and the growth you've done, yo,
Yeah.
it's pretty, it's 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 amazing. But at the same time, thinking about how at that time when you probably wrote that, or I wrote that, I didn't think I could be out of that
Grow
state.
from it. Uh-huh.
Yes. And
And
always,
there's healing in that.
yes. And the hopefulness of it, the hopefulness of
Mhm.
it. I'm on walking on 5 years of it, and definitely am not the same Janet that I was prior to that, or the same Janet that I was when I left LA to here. I'm a completely different person, and I'm grateful for it. So I would say
Mhm.
that, journaling is something that I take pride in. I set an alarm on my phone. I set an alarm on my phone, um,
Uh-huh.
and it's usually 30 minutes around my bedtime. And every single day I put it on there, because there are days where, like, I'm just dead tired and I just want to go to sleep. And I'm like, no.
Mhm.
And next year is when I'll complete the book per se. So I'm looking forward to, like, going back and reading everything, because it's
Ooh, get ready, because I know when I go back and read, I'm like, oh man, I feel I want to give my, self a hug from when I wrote that. So give yourself some grace as you go through that too.
It definitely is. So yeah, I do that. And music is another form of self-care for me, and the empowerment that I find through music. I've definitely leaned into podcasting, I would say, the last year and a half, both from a
Hmm.
professional standpoint. So listening to women who are women in the sports industry, and they've done some sports podcasting, to
Now
um,
you got another podcast to add on to the list.
listening to Latinas like yourself that are taking on this space, and other Latinas as well that are helping to empower women. And then, of course, from a news perspective, I listen to it. It's different. I can multitask with it. I can clean. I can go on a run and listen to it, and there's like hours of it. So
Hmm.
it's early on. Before, I thought that just eating right and sleeping right was it for self-care, but you start
There's so much
evolving.
more to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, what
it's like in
what
it's in everything that we do.
what are some self-care tips that you do?
Um, Definitely, I'm really big on journaling. Something that really helps me is having a morning routine. And even though it's a routine, it's how I feel good. And so waking up, I usually walk my dog. I wake up and automatically yeah, my little Demi, I automatically put workout clothes. I walk her really quickly, and then I jump into a workout for at least like an hour. That when I do that, that really helps me throughout the day. After I do a workout, then it's like shower, coffee, breakfast. I always have breakfast every morning, and then I start working. So having that like really solid in the morning helps me feel so balanced throughout the day. And there's other little things that I do throughout, definitely. Like I take a lot of deep breaths. I take a lot of deep breaths with my clients. Getting outside. Huh?
So I say that because I learned through my grief journey that I wasn't breathing right. I didn't know that, and a lot of the anxiousness that I was experiencing was because part of it, well, most of it was learning how to breathe properly and pausing yourself and being able to kind of catch it. So it's, I'm glad that you're mentioning that because I didn't know that.
Yeah, doing some mindful breathing. It's like a breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. There's so many different techniques, but the biggest piece is that you're mindfully breathing, that you're paying attention to your breath. And I do that like throughout my sessions. We're like, all right, let's take a deep breath together. And so we'll do it together. I do that a lot. And also getting outside. I notice that I need to get outside, even if it's just a short walk, but just take a breath of fresh air. Again, taking a breath. To make me feel balanced. So those are some of like the bigger pieces that I practice almost like without even noticing. It's just part of who I am now.
Well, I'm taking some notes on that because I definitely, especially throughout this year, change of scenery is definitely like I feel a different energy the days that I would go out and run, especially when I was working, when I still am working from home, but there are days where I needed to go outside, just walk around my block, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
And that will make a huge difference in your day. And you will feel so much better. You'll feel a little bit more alive, more awake. So there's tremendous benefits from, stepping outside, even if it's 5 minutes, it's okay. Hopefully nothing will completely come shattering down.
No, it
5
never
minutes.
does. It never does. I used to be very nervous about leaving my desk to go take a walk in the middle of the day. And when I was working when I was working in baseball, I used to go run in the middle of the day. And for me, exercise in the middle of the day just gave me that extra charge so that come 3 o'clock and all of these, all of these extra hours of work wasn't felt so heavy at all. And it's definitely something that working from home I've incorporated now.
Yeah, it's amazing. Bueno, mujer, I heard you say that people can reach out to you if they have questions. So are you open to me linking your LinkedIn or an email?
Yeah, you can definitely reach. Yes, LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram. You can definitely open to reaching out. If there's anyone that wants to get involved with WISE, just in general, I do have contacts with a lot of I sit on the board of WISE Atlanta here, but it's like I said, the organization is huge. There's also a new organization that recently launched that I'm really excited about. It's called Latinx in Sports. Like I said, I wish this organization existed when I was growing up, but now it's here. They're growing. It's young professionals that are entering the space, and I love the virtual cheerleading and congratulations that we do. So they're another great resource as well. So thank you for inviting me to your virtual space. I feel privileged and honored to share in this conversation with you. I'm proud of you and seeing you grow and make an impact as well. So
from a little 17-year-old when you met me, and here we are.
I know.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you. This was another episode of Therapy, Etc. I appreciate everybody watching us. If you're watching us on YouTube, please rate, subscribe, do all the things on the social media platforms. You can find me on Therapy, Etc. podcast on Instagram, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube. So thank you again for listening or watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.